Welcome and good morning. It's nice to see all of you on this chilly day. I'm Laurel Sepulvetra, and I'm delighted to be your worship leader this morning. One thing I love about this congregation is our wonderful chancel choir. I want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's visiting us for the first time. We are an intentional community gathered around our shared promise to support each other's individual spiritual journeys. We don't all believe the same things in exactly the same way, but we do share the same values and the same commitment to our spiritual growth. We share the faith that our beliefs become real when we act on them to make the world a better place. And we share the commitment to live a life grounded in community. If you're joining us online, fill out a visitor form in the link in the description. We'd love to connect with you. I have a few announcements. An invitation on Saturday, February 3rd, from 2 to 4 p.m. here in the church. The TP Raisers Volunteers and Racial Justice Ministry have joined together to bring the Toward Right Relationship with Native Peoples workshop to this community. The goal of the interactive workshop is for participants to understand the legacy of the doctrine of discovery as it has affected both the European colonizers and the indigenous people of the U.S. since 1942. They hope to simulate reflection, discussion, and appropriate actions toward justice, healing, and right relationship among all people of this land. All are welcome, and there's a table in the Sky Room with lots more info and this poster. And now Rachel has an announcement.
I'm Rachel Alba. I'm the Director of Religious Education here. And typically when I announce things, they are specifically for kids and families, but this time it's for everyone. So consider this your official invitation to the Winter Camp-In, which is happening next Saturday night. We'll start at 6 p.m. with a potluck dinner, which means you get to bring your favorite things. And then we are going to have lots of fun activities in the building. So in the Sky Room, we'll have Team Cranium and Team Pictionary. In here, we'll be doing some karaoke where you get to stand at this pulpit and do karaoke. We'll also maybe have a jam session with some musicians from the community. Down the hallway, we'll have a craft room, and we'll be doing stuff with some glow-in-the-dark paint on t-shirts and wearable items, which sounds really fun. And then around 8:30-ish, we'll be pitching tents, actually pitching tents inside the building, and you will get cozy inside of your tent and sleep overnight here. And then in the morning, we will have a service. We'll also give you some bagels and coffee and things before the service. We'll have our annual Ask Me Anything service where you get to ask Rev David any question that you'd like to ask him at 9 a.m. So, right? So this is also a week-long process of you getting to figure out what questions you want to ask him. Make sure you bring the best ones and the hardest ones to answer. But hopefully you will be there next week, 6 p.m. on Saturday through whenever you want to leave on Sunday morning. And of course, you're also welcome to just come for the evening and leave before we all camp out in here. It's up to you what you want to do. But I hope to see you there.
Partly, I have this theory, and it is maybe a stereotype of Boulder, that in this congregation, we have about a 1-to-1 ratio of people to tents. So I'm curious to see this. We'll see if that's right. It's good to be back with y'all. I was homesick last week, and so grateful for Reverend Jenny Amstead stepping in at the last moment, and so grateful for all of you and your flexibility. It's good to be here on a cold morning. I love it when this room is absolutely jam-packed full with people, and I love it when it is less jam-packed full with the intrepid people who made it through the snow. Fred Cole told me we have already passed the high temperature for the day and are now headed back down again. So it's good to be together and good to be with all y'all online. I've said this before, I think, but when I learned about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in school, I learned about him as history. I learned about him the same way everyone born since 1968, history. And in fact, I don't know that I really learned the story of Dr. King. I learned the story that white America wants to tell itself about him. A man who took a case to the conscience of America that all of us are equal human beings, of equal dignity and equal rights, and then in the court of public opinion won that case. And yes, this story goes that white America likes to tell, there are still few pieces of that work left unfinished. But he won the case, and we can at last honestly say the words a slaveholder penned, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. The story, in other words, that white America often wants to tell ourselves is that the great task lies behind us. And in that telling, we are lying to ourselves, mistaking a milestone for a finish line. The Civil War decided the legal question of human enslavement, but not the question of white supremacy at the foundations of our national order. The Civil Rights Movement decided the legal question of Jim Crow segregation, but did not break the grip of white supremacist racism at the foundation of the order of this nation. A milestone is not the finish line, and you know it's a milestone because of the reaction to the simple, direct, self-evident three-word thesis, Black Lives Matter. That self-evident statement that our nation treats those lives as if they don't matter in the same way as white lives brought such a profound and reactionary panic. And because a feature of this service today is making you uncomfortable as white people who are here, that reaction was not just a feature of the right wing or open racists. White intellectuals panicked the way that we do by debating the precise analysis and nuance and meaning of a very simple and obvious and direct three-word thesis, Black Lives Matter. The system of racial hierarchy in this country, white supremacy, did not go away over and done. It looks different than it did a couple of generations ago. Or maybe it's just that we have new awareness of what it really has looked like this whole time. Dr. King knew that. He knew the complexity of that. In the very last Sunday service he preached before his murder, he said, if a man doesn't have a job or income, he has neither life nor liberty, nor the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. He knew then what we often don't tell in his story, that equality is not as simple as equality before the law. Racism, he said, is not a simple and isolated evil that we legislate away. It is deeply woven into poverty, into class, into economics, into militarism. It is structural, institutional, intersectional. And in that frame, a Civil Rights Act, a Voting Rights Act, bought with the blood of martyrs for peace, was the easy work. It was the easy work compared with the undoing of poverty, of global military empire, of the 10,000 ways that white supremacy still flourishes in this nation. Dr. King knew that his work and his life passed milestones, but no finish line. And his invitation was not an invitation to a victory celebration, but to a journey towards a place of justice where we will never, in fact, arrive, but nonetheless is worth spending our life working for. Which is to say, MLK Sunday is not a day to look back unless it's a day to look forward. It's not a day to celebrate the victories of the past unless it is a day to rise to the call of the present. It's not a day of simple stories unless it's also a day to face the interwoven injustices of this nation. A day for honesty when the world is in denial, when we ourselves are in denial. And at the center of all of that, at the center of the work on a day like today, the driving force, the motive is not ultimately anger or resentment. Certainly it's not guilt or shame, and now we better go work hard to undo that. The driving force behind this work is not hate or even hope. It's love, not the intellectual exercise of love, but the experienced fact of love. It is the felt feeling of love, of compassion, of the bone-deep, rock-solid belief that other people are as real as you are, matter as much as you do, are struggling as much as you are as worthy as you are as whole in their imperfection as you are. So I invite you to rise in body and in spirit, to sing it out, to sing these words we're about to, not as some saccharine promise. How could anyone tell you you're anything less than beautiful? But as a knowing deep in your body. Let's rise, let's sing together.
The chalice is the symbol of our liberal faith. It is the warmth of compassion, the fire of justice, a lamp on the spiritual path. If you're joining us online and have a chalice nearby, please get ready to light it with us. I'd like to invite Neal McBurrnett to light this morning's chalice.
My heart has been very heavy these last few months. The tragic violence on October 7th in Israel deeply affected me, and the subsequent retaliatory actions against the people of Gaza and the West Bank have only compounded this grief. On top of all those issues, I despair to see the situation sow discord among many of my friends and allies. exactly when we need to find a way out of the cycle of violence, which has flared up regularly in the Middle East for over a century, I see fear and anger redoubling, overshadowing the flickers of hope. I'm grateful that this spiritual community is here to help me with the grief and to remind me how UUs have been a beacon of hope in similar times. Tomorrow we celebrate the birth of Martin Luther King, and I just wish we could draw upon Dr. King's wisdom and inspiring approaches now. He had such a special gift for bringing people together. But of course, in his final years, after winning the hearts and minds of so many for civil rights, he started speaking out for an end to the war in Vietnam. And those times were also very divisive ones for our nation. He got a lot of pushback then. I wish he had had the chance to continue to help us find moral clarity and unity and see the more widespread agreement that emerged of his prophetic ideas. We have a special connection to those times. Strider Benston was very active in UUCB for many years. In 1965, during the first march from Selma to Montgomery, he was attacked by the police. He's the hero of this book, If White Kids Die. He now lives in Longmont. Yet I speak today not to persuade you to see the world as I do, but rather because I know there are many valuable perspectives here which are worth listening to. In many quarters, even broaching these topics can spark discord. I yearn instead for an opening of hearts and minds as we confront these massively complex quandaries. Engaging in our famous UU free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's what I was hoping for as I started visiting this church more often this fall. And indeed, I've appreciated the ways these issues have been touched on in the services and reflections from this pulpit over the past few months. Here I find a haven for engaging with diverse viewpoints on challenging matters. I light this chalice in gratitude for this spiritual community.
To covenant is to commit, that even if we fall short of our aspirations, we will not let them go. We will never cease from trying again to live them out. In that spirit, gathered in person and online, will you all together speak our covenant aloud? We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
In prayer and meditation each week, we do different sorts of practices. Silence and stillness, words of intention, of hope, sometimes embodied, sometimes breathing. And in all of those, the point of this work, of this moment in the service, is not to do it exactly right in the right way. The point of all of those, and different forms will work better or worse for you, is to open up something inside of you, to help you find, not for me to like force you into, but to help you find and open. Maybe it's like a door of compassion inside yourself, the place that lets you get out of your own way and see and feel your way into being connected with others. Maybe it's cracking open that room that lives within yourself that carries such a weight of grief that you don't look inside, even though it's still there all the time. Maybe it's a kind of quiet listening. Maybe this moment in the service is a sort of a stillness that you can hear what is on your heart and your mind and your spirit. Those things that are difficult to hear sitting in traffic or warming the car up or getting the to-do lists and the laundry done. Whatever that internal work is for you, will you join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation? We'll begin with a breath together. I'll share these words by Karen G. Johnston. Wise ones say we can be good enough, and imperfect all at the same time. Wise ones say that we can listen to understand, not necessarily agree, and be moved by a truth that does not make sense to our lived experience, and let it change our world. They tell us also to raise up those who are trodden upon, to cultivate humility when the world would rather we grow certitude in our hearts. Wise ones remind us we can recognize that those who do harm do not always intend to, and that it is still ours to reckon with the impact. They tell us that we can say, I don't know, and I'm not sure, and still be warrior, still be whole, still be leader. In fact, the kind of leader we long for. Wise ones tell us to pay attention to not just the what, but also the how. May this be the meditation of our hearts. May this be the words of our mouths, not just the what, but also the how. May we be the wise ones. May we be the wise ones today and every day. And be together in silence for a few moments. Amen. We hold in love today Marge McGough, who celebrated her 92nd birthday this last week. And we hold in love Connie Pearson and her whole family. Jerry's memorial service will be next Sunday at 2 o'clock. We hold with love and care Sally Dugar, who writes, my stepsister Karen Bowman died November 28th. Her family and I are mourning her loss and celebrating her life. All of these things together, joy and celebration, grief and loss, we hold. Ritual is an outward expression of an inward movement. And in this ritual we do, coming forward to place a stone that symbolizes the joys or the sorrows, whatever it is weighing on you, we are tending and teaching ourselves to recognize that hope and suffering together, both, are woven daily into living. And in doing that ritual, becoming people who recognize beauty and tragedy which fill this world. For those here in person, I invite you to come forward as you feel moved. We'll start with the back half of the room and by the windows, and then folks here in the front. Silently take a stone and feel its weight. Feel your body slowly warming it. And let it be an emblem of your thankfulness or your worry, both. And then place it in the sacred earth in the company of all the joys and sorrows of this community. And please come forward as you feel moved. White folks, you want to get uncomfortable for like 15 minutes? 25 years ago, Tima Okun, a white woman, wrote this. She said she works around racial justice and educational consulting, and she says sometime in the late 1990s, I arrived home after a particularly frustrating consultation with an organization I was working with at the time. In a flurry of exasperation, I sat down at my computer and typed the words flowing of their own accord into a quick and dirty listing of some of the characteristics of white supremacy culture. Some of those characteristics that showed up in our organizations and communities and homes. The paper I wrote in such a frenzy on that afternoon so many years ago lists 15 behaviors, all of them interconnected and mutually reinforcing. And here they are: perfectionism, a sense of urgency, defensiveness and denial, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, the belief in one right direction, paternalism, either-or binary thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism, progress defined as more, the right to profit, this is a lot, objectivity, and the right to comfort, the right to comfort. She says, our institutions not only value these characteristics, they to some extent require them and then constantly reproduce them in order to benefit from them. White supremacy culture trains us to internalize attitudes and behaviors that don't serve any of us. A belief that we can be perfect, that we should be perfect, raises the questions. Who decides what perfect is? Why would we want to be perfect? She says, take another example. Worship of the written word is not in any way associated with the ability to write well. Worship of the written word is a cultural belief that something only has meaning if it is written down. And only if it is written down according to a certain very white standard in a certain very white way. Here's why it matters. This belief leads us to ignore or devalue all the wisdom that comes to us intuitively, through our bodies, through story, music, film, song, through slang, through humor, through children's games, through prayer, through Spanish or Arabic or so many other languages. All of those are devalued in favor of the written word written in the right way. Another way to say this is that white culture in this country, this city, this church, operates invisibly. We treat it, so many of us white folks grew up not learning that this thing we were doing was a culture, but just learning this is the normal way that people operate in the world. Cultures are things that are different from the normal way people operate in the world. Which I'm saying that, hopefully this sounds ridiculous, but also, this is the thing that so many of us grew up and learned was normal, that whiteness is not a culture, it doesn't have characteristics, it's just the ordinary way that people interact with each other. And surely what's normal can't be bad? Let's dig in, not to all 15 of these behaviors. My goal is not actually for you to memorize what all of these are and mean, and, instead, how can it be that perfectionism is a bad thing? Well, look, perfectionism as a characteristic of white supremacy culture doesn't mean that excellence is bad. It doesn't mean that hard work isn't worthwhile. It doesn't mean that we should have no standards or not care about the quality of a thing. Instead, the sharp question here for perfectionism is, who gets to decide what perfect looks like? Every so often, I hear from a minister colleague, so we're on Facebook groups, and we, just for other UU ministers, and we trade ideas and stories and readings and things that work great, and also, like the Facebook groups you're a part of, there's a healthy amount of complaining in them. And every so often, I hear from a colleague who is berated by someone that their Sunday morning services last more than 60 minutes or ran shorter than 60 minutes. I don't think anyone's ever said that to me here. I'm really grateful that they haven't so far. I don't know. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then pick up. We should finish around 2 or 3 this afternoon. But here's the thing. What that person is experiencing is an expectation of what perfection looks like. The perfect service is one that runs 60 minutes, not less, not more. And the most important thing, the measure of success, is what that time interval is. That's the only thing that's good enough, right? You have been to hour-long services that went by in the blink of an eye, and you looked back up again and you said, where did this go? You have been to, maybe even here, hour-long services that lasted for several days. Right? Neither of those things is about the clock time. Those are about the feeling time. It's about the internal experience of what's happening to you inside that time. Who decides what perfect is? Is it the clock time? Is it the feeling time? Or both, or neither? Whose voice counts in determining that? This shows up in expectations around music also. I'm going to say a thing, and we're going to see if the choir agrees with me. I spent most of the day Thursday, with Emily Coriath, our new music director who starts in a few weeks. And mostly what we talked about was vision and hope and feeling of music in a service. We talked about why to have music in a service, what good looks like. We told each other in a whole variety of different ways, the same kind of conversation I've had with lots of folks here, including Judson, that the thing we care about the very most for music in a service is not the technical perfection of what is going on, but instead of music as an invitation into a kind of experience, music as a way of knowing, of feeling, of being transformed, transported, a heart experience maybe of catharsis or comfort. Maybe you get there through technical accuracy. If you're performing Bach, you need technical accuracy to get that heart experience. And maybe you don't. Maybe with some other form or shape of music, that's not the thing. Maybe if someone next to you starts crying instead of singing, that is in fact the most important thing, not that they have just missed the last several lines of the music. Maybe if someone next to you is clearly singing the wrong notes, humming along at the first time in church volume of, maybe, in fact, that is what success looks like, because that person is having an experience that I belong, I am a part of. I feel comfortable enough that I get to participate before what I'm doing is technically perfect and I already know all the hymns. Rachel told me about a conversation she had this week, not here at church, when someone asked, should a requirement for being part of a church choir be that you know how to read music? And this is, on the one hand, a reasonable thing to ask. And this is, on the other hand, a totally absurd thing to ask. Because learning and singing sheet music that you read off the page is not what music is everywhere. It's what white Western music is. That's not how music works in many, many, many other cultures. In fact, that's not even how the music at our 9 a.m. service works. If you sang this morning without a hymnal, that's not even how music works at this service. I say that to dig into the nuance here, because the point is not that it is bad to read music. It's not bad to read music. Okay, I think they were already there. The choir was not worried about that. And the point is not that you are bad to play sheet music. The point is that when you require a person to read music before they join the choir, you're making a choice about which cultural norms and expectations are the ones that matter. You're saying that cultural norms, cultural practices of learning by ear are not, in fact, welcome in the music that we make. What's welcome is white singing traditions. And you may not intend to send that message. In fact, you may not even know that's the message that's being sent. But that's the impact. Okay, so we don't require sight reading to join the choir here. But the point of working through this is not to say that we're okay, we don't require it, so don't worry about it. The point here is that the whole story of this white culture, this white supremacy culture, the point of talking about this is not to then evaluate, are we good or bad? Are we doing this well or are we doing this poorly? But instead to notice it. That some of the things that we do, the choices we make, the values that we have, aren't just the automatic norm, but are in fact specific to this culture, even in this room. And we don't have to choose to do them. And who doesn't count? Who doesn't matter when we do things that way? White supremacy culture is not about a deliberate set of choices that white people have made in order to subjugate people of color. It's a set of cultural norms and expectations that are invisibly at work, unconsciously in operation. And not only do they make the expectations of white culture the norm, and people who are not a part of that culture notice that and pick that up. Not only do they make that the norm, they disconnect each of us from ourselves, too, in the process. When you have to be perfectly put together all the time, you don't get to feel you're hurting. When you have to wear a mask that says everything in your life is okay and under control and it's all perfect, you don't get to actually be a whole person. And that's not just about who belongs here, that's also about what parts of yourself are you having to cut off in order to conform. The work of undoing these cultural expectations is not just about making whiteness visible, this water we're swimming in invisibly. It's also about living into our own wholeness, white folks as white folks. It's about being in relationship with yourself and the world where love is in fact at the center. And I am a great big history nerd, so I can't help but say this is the ghost of Calvinism hovering around us. So I hear, if you can't hear it online, the excitement about Calvinism in the room. It's so palpable. It's just, they heard me say Calvinism, and I could hardly contain. Yeah. On the other hand, it's good that Calvinism didn't get an amen. Okay, here's what I mean. Here's why it matters. In Calvinism, which is our religious ancestors in the 16 and 1700s, and a huge part of the ancestors of Protestantism in this whole country, God has chosen who's getting saved and who isn't. And we don't know which is which. So the best that we can do is look for clues in the lives of the people around us. Are you behaving well? All right, maybe you're getting saved. Are you behaving badly? All right, you're probably going to hell. So, and there are a great many people who still operate in this paradigm, so I recognize I'm underselling this a little bit. But the point here is the more perfect a person is, the more likely they're getting saved, and the less perfect a person is, the more likely they're getting damned. So it is terribly, terribly, life-shapingly important not to have any problems or show any weakness or any deficiency or defect of any kind ever. You have to sing every note exactly right, or else all the people around you will know that you are secretly bad. Right? I'm saying this in a way that is silly. Also pause. How much of the time do you actually move through the world that way? I move through the world that way a lot of the time. I don't want to. I'm not proud of it. But I'm saying we still operate this way, even if we know it's ridiculous. Okun describes it this way. She says, perfectionism is the conditioned, not innate, conditioned belief and attitude that we can be perfect based on a standard or set of rules we didn't create, and that we are led to believe will prove our value. Perfectionism is the conditioned, not innate, conditioned belief and attitude that we can determine whether others are showing up as perfect and demand and expect that they do so. White supremacy culture uses perfectionism to preserve power and status quo. It is, on the one hand, a totally ridiculous belief to move through the world with, and it is still this ghost hovering around us invisibly, that to make a mistake is to be a mistake. Okun writes that any attempt to be perfect is, of course, a fool's errand, not that we're fools, because learning from our mistakes is how we grow and learn and lean into our glorious and flawed humanity. We can never be perfect. We can never be perfect when perfection is defined by others, particularly by institutions and cultures that don't care about us. We are, in fact, already perfect, born perfect, no striving necessary, and strongest when we're allowed to be vulnerable with ourselves and each other. And this white culture, white supremacy culture, doesn't allow, doesn't want, doesn't make room for vulnerability, which is a tragedy for all of us. We're leaning into perfectionism, going deep, because I want to suggest that undoing these toxic traits of white culture, really, I'm like pitching the white folks listening to this right now, right? I'm pitching you on this, white people. That undoing these toxic traits of white culture is not something you need to do in order for other people to feel okay and welcome. It is that, but it's also something that we need to do for our own liberation. So often talking about race or racism or white culture, the negative sides of things, people start to feel personally blamed and shamed and guilty. And I'm not leaving. You know that that is a trap to fall into. Don't get stuck there. You know we do this stuff. We minimize. My part in this is so small. We deny. It's not really that bad. It can't really have such an impact. We avoid. This is overwhelming. Thankfully, church ends soon. And all of these reactions, I know them. I feel those too sometimes. The thing is, every one of those reactions are dead ends. There is no destination. Once you start down this road of minimization and avoidance or denial, there's nothing there. That doesn't go anywhere. And the status quo loves us to go down those roads because it keeps us looking inwards at ourselves and this own personal concern. Am I good enough? Have I done this well enough? I shouldn't feel badly about this. Instead of actually lifting our heads up to look at the world around us, to be in relation with the people around us. If you're stuck inwards, struggling with blame or shame or guilt, things get to stay exactly the way they are. We open up this service singing, "How could anyone ever tell you that you are anything less than beautiful, less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice your loving is a miracle, that you're connected to my soul?" And maybe you sang that as if you were singing to someone else, as if there was someone else that message needed to go to. But it's for you also. It's for you in your imperfection and fear and vulnerability. The driving force at the core of this work for justice, for racial justice, is not anger or resentment or hate or even hope. The driving force at the center of this work is love, not the intellectual exercise of love, the experienced fact of love, the reality of it, the felt feeling of compassion. The trust that every person is as real as you are, as struggling as you are, as worthy as you are, as whole in their imperfection. And we tell the story this weekend. So often we tell the story of Dr. King and forget the story of Reverend King, a Christian minister who did what he did because he was convinced and convicted by the power of his God's love. A Christian who knew that what love looks like when you live it out loud, what love looks like in public, is justice. And friends, you don't have to be a Christian to believe that love is at the center of things, at the center of living, at the center of being a person. But I believe that without love at the center, anger or resentment is not going to take you far enough through life. Fear or logic can get you out the door this morning, but they won't take you to the far shore. We're journeying towards this place of justice made real in the world that none of us are going to live to see made fully real. Not one of us. And love is the compass heading we follow, and love is the fuel that powers us and is the only thing strong enough to spend a life on. It looks like bold proclamation and call for justice. It looks like marches and legislation, and it looks like quiet care. It looks like the courage to face that the things which you take as just normal, regular people stuff are in fact not. They're functions of the culture that you live inside of without even noticing. Love is the thing that's strong enough for you to ask, do I want to still participate in that? The fact is, we're not perfect. And strength is our ability to say that out loud. These days are dark with storms, as the song says. We'll sing it in just a moment. These days are dark with storms, and trouble waits at every turn, and the journey is long. And we'll go on into it. A people of hope and wholeness, undoing a culture of whiteness for the liberation of all, including ourselves. Will you sing it with me? Will you rise in body or spirit? Paul's going to play us in. Will you rise and sing together? Not as a saccharine promise, but as a knowing.
The troubles rage at every turn.
This month, our offering goes to Boulder Food Rescue. Please watch this informative video.
I've been volunteering with Boulder Food Rescue for 2 years. Myself and the other 75 active volunteers have moved over 1 million pounds of food in the past 4 years of BFR being around. I do it because I love meeting new people, getting to see new sides of town, and volunteering and making a big impact on my community has never been as simple as riding my bike.
Boulder Food Rescue not only provides social justice, it also provides climate justice. By keeping 500,000 pounds of food from going into the landfill each year, they prevent 950 tons of methane from going into the atmosphere. Methane is more than 28 times as potent as carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those gathered in person, you can scan the QR code or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community.
James Baldwin says, "Not everything that is faced can be changed. But nothing can be changed until it is faced. I invite you into that, into the trust in your own imperfection, to have the courage to face the invisible and unconscious assumptions of whiteness that shape who counts and who matters in this community. To face that work and work to change. Will you rise in body or in spirit? And we'll close in song.